Hi, I'm going to try to go through this really fun album I did. It was a lot of fun. I had tons of problems with my camera this weekend, so I'm going to have to get new equipment. My camera just isn't professional quality. I'm never going to be able to do a really good video for you guys until I replace it. But I am going to show you this album because it's awesome. It's using a fabric as a result of these muslin bags that I bought. So these are 4x6 muslin bags, and they have a little drawstring at the top. But they're made of muslins, and they're really easy to use. And what I loved about them, I said, wow, these actually would make a great way of showing off a technique called image transfer. And that's where you transfer an image onto cloth. And so I'm going to be transferring photos onto cloth for this album. But the best part about ever using bags or envelopes is the pocket. So you get tons of pockets. You can put your souvenirs in them. You can put, in this case, this album smells phenomenal because I've actually got lavender in there in some of the pockets. Because we visited this lavender store and it was great, but more on that later. I bought a pen. This is a little plane we took out there, and the pen just, sticks onto the cloth like it's supposed to. So it's kind of fun working with cloth versus paper sometimes. And just love the way the image is transferred onto the muslin. It makes the image completely part of the bag as opposed to being glued or adhered to the bag. So every image on the right side of this album has actually been transferred into the muslin. All you do to do this, by the way, is just use Mod Podge on a photo. So let me go back to that. Let me continue showing you what's being shown here, and that is the binding. So I just use felt to cover the whole book. I used the white felt because I love white. And on the inside, it's actually got another bag lining the inside that's been stamped on in the front and the back using the French script stamp, which I love. And then the binding uses book tape and book cloth too. So technique number one that I used in here was the transfer of the image. But technique number two is right here where I've edged the photos with some acrylic paint. And then technique number three is I actually created these little tags just using cardstock and flowers, and also put some of that acrylic paint on the edge of them to get that little Cape Cod shabby chic look. Stamped on the paper using the same stamp in different orientations so that it would look different even though it was the same large stamp. And then I hand wrote titles on each of the tags in the front and used a chipboard title on the back, which you'll see really shortly. The back is actually a pull-out piece, and I painted at the top there. And you can see that I wrote my stories on the back on these small pieces of paper. This could actually be a lot longer. If you wanted to do these journaling pieces on a larger piece of paper and tell more of a story, you definitely could. You could make it 3 rows tall and then just fold it into thirds in order to get it to fit behind there. But use copy paper on these as opposed to cardstock, otherwise they'll be too bulky. And then I've just taken little flowers at the top to act as the pull piece. But in every case, I did the little edging with the acrylic paint, the stamping, the handwritten title for the front of the tag, and then just keeping with the shabby chic feel. I think acrylic paint is the best thing for showing off a shabby chic look because, in Cape Cod, you'll have sun-bleached paint, and you can't really get that feel out of paper, but acrylic paint on top of the paper does give you that. I could have crackled it, but I didn't want to take that much time. I just did this yesterday, and it was a really quick and easy album to do. In each case, I tried to remember to include some of the acrylic paint around the edges and around the edges of the tags, so photos and tags. And then I did stamping on the front of the book and the back of the book so that you can see the French script there that's used kind of like for the back and the front. And then the papers inside, I'm sorry, right here I'm explaining that I have put in some lavender to make it smell awesome. So the whole book smells like lavender because the front and the back pockets are full of lavender. The other pockets are just full of things that were bought. So there might be some business cards in there. You could also put journaling in there if you wanted to. A card would fit in there. Brochures would fit in those pockets. You could even do more journaling with larger strips of paper. So I really love the pockets that came out of the muslin. It just kind of made an instant pocket and no work on my part. It just was kind of built in. And then embedding the photo into the muslin just made it seem like it was made that way. It was meant to be a photo album. This is just felt wrapped around the whole book. It's got a piece of book cloth and some book strips that are glued in there and sewn in there in order to keep the whole thing together. And then the top of each bag has that little string, and so I took advantage of that string and just attached some I Love Roses, mini roses, which I thought was fun. Because the whole reason I did this album is because someone challenged me to take this style on. I'm usually very formal, elegant, or clean and simple. I usually don't do shabby chic or, you know, the more often cloth type albums. And so it was a challenge, and so I tried to include as many flowers as I could since I don't usually use a lot of flowers. In here I embellished the ribbon just by putting in some pink pearls into the ribbon. What makes ribbon expensive is the embellishment. So if you buy inexpensive ribbon and then embellish it yourself, you'd be surprised what you end up with, something really pretty. Actually, I used a piece of the Prima packaging to create that acrylic demi-circle that has the 2011 on it. It's kind of floating up there, and then it has a Tattered Angels butterfly that I didn't decide to glimmer mist. I just left it as is. And then here on the edge, I just took some blue ribbon and ran it through my sewing machine. So I just smunched it up as I ran it through the machine. I didn't even try to be neat or tack this in advance. I just pushed and sewed and pushed and sewed and pushed and sewed. And it came out kind of cool. I really like it. I especially like the way this album feels. It has a very friendly, touchy-feely kind of effect to it that makes you want to look at it and feel it. And I find that's relaxing. So I know I have been trained as a advocate for crises management, and one of the things that they always say is that touch and smell are very helpful for calming people, grounding people. And so this is a nice little album for me to look at when I'm in a bad mood or when work has been rough. I think this album will cheer me up. All the papers in this album, with the exception of the journaling strips, are actually very old papers that I found in my craft room that were from a framing company. And they had all this stitching in them. So I said, wow, this is perfect, all the stitching. So I just kind of cut it up. I used my Stampin' Up! Tearing ruler so I wouldn't waste a lot of paper tearing. You actually waste paper when you don't use a ruler sometimes because you can't get the edges without taking at least a half an inch off. With the ruler, you can get right up to the edge and get your nice pretty torn edges. So I enjoyed using this paper. I distressed it with our distressing tool, and I glued that on actually using my Xyron machine. The beauty of a fabric glue or the Xyron machine is you won't get this too wet, because you don't want to get this bag too wet. You don't want to encourage the two sides of the bag to adhere together. When you do the transferring of the photo, one thing that I did is I put a strip of acrylic paper inside the bag so that as the Mod Podge and the photo melded together, they didn't glue the bag shut. So whenever you do an image transfer, just paint your product with the Mod Podge, then put the photo on top of that, let it sit overnight. Then in the morning, you just want to drench it down, and then you can rub off the paper and it leaves the image behind. But you don't want to spend a lot of time with that bag being wet, so just remember to keep it dry. Try to use dry adhesives if you can. Your glue gun is a great option. And I'm glad you could come today. Thank you. I really enjoyed this album, so I hope you come back for another album. I'm going to do one more because I didn't do step by step on this, so I'm going to do one more quick and easy album either tomorrow or Wednesday. Thank you. and have a great weekend.